So thank you, Marc, for joining us. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, first of all, thank you for allowing me to participate in today's session. Once again, my name is Marc Riccio, President of Specialized Data Systems, based out of New Haven, Connecticut. Been in the software development business for over 35 years. We are attending this conference today to promote our operational risk management software, which includes business continuity, incident response software, policy management, and vendor management software. We just came out with an IT risk assessment software product that companies can use to perform an IT risk assessment on their computer operations. But the product that has gained a lot of interest is another brand new product that we released in 2023. It is a product called Remote Climate, which is a climate risk assessment product. Now, since we do business with a lot of banks and credit unions and financial institutions, our banking clients and credit union clients have approached us because they want us to do a climate risk assessment on their loan portfolio.
So let me ask the question so the listeners know what we're talking about.
Yes.
What is a climate risk assessment?
A climate risk assessment, well, first of all, you need to understand what is climate risk.
Okay.
And
I changed my question. What is climate risk?
What is climate risk?
And climate risk, it really be broken out into two categories. One is called transition risk, and the other is called physical risk. Transition risk is measuring or trying to measure climate risk based on science or scientific models that have been developed to project what the climate will be 30 or 50 or 100 years from now.
Okay.
Now, that could be a very political and confusing, confrontational discussion.
I was going to say, talk to us about that, because some people won't even let you say the word climate change.
Yeah.
Right? So
You're right. And so there are some of my clients who, when I mentioned it, I've seen their eyes roll.
Oh,
And
yeah.
okay, now the other type of way to measure it is something they call physical risk. And we developed a database where we can measure any property in the United States based on 18 different weather hazards. That database was formulated and invented by FEMA. And there's a lot of information on it. But what we can do is we can take a bank's loan portfolio and run it through our engine and do a climate risk assessment on their mortgage portfolio based on 18 different weather hazards or threats.
Are we talking like hurricanes, that kind of thing?
Hurricanes, lightning, coastal flooding, river flooding, river ravine flooding, avalanche, mudslides, volcanic activity, so on and so forth. There's 18 definitions. But the beauty of it is we can look up any property in the United States by census tract. You got to understand what a census tract is. Census tract, like for example in Connecticut, first of all, there's over 85,000 census tracts in the United States. Alaska, Hawaii, and the U.S. territories. It's like 85,500 census tracts. in the state of Connecticut, there are 800, let's say around 850 census tracts. I live in the New Haven area, the Connecticut area, that has about 135,000 people that live in New Haven. There are 32 census tracts. And then, you know, get more granular. I live in a town called Branford, Connecticut. Branford has about 28,000 citizens. And we have six census tracts. Okay? So you might have 1,000 properties in one census tract. And that's how the government and how the banks have to report their loan activity by census tract to the government to make sure they're following fair housing laws, demographic information, that sort of thing. So now compared to Los Angeles, has 30, you know, I don't know how many millions of people live in Los Angeles. I think it's like 3.4 million. They have 3,100 census tracts. So, you know, it can get pretty granular. But what we can do, we have banks and credit unions that have already implemented our technology. We can take their assets, which are loans, and we can run their loan portfolio through our engine and come up with a climate risk assessment for their entire loan portfolio based on 18 different weather hazards, including community resilience. And community resilience would mean in Buffalo, New York, they're used to dealing with snow.
Oh, yeah.
So they can bounce back from bad cold weather or blizzards a lot better than Dallas, Texas. But you also can get not only the community resilience, but the community vulnerability. Because the government, like the OCC, the FDIC, these are banking agencies, Federal Reserve, they want to make sure that financial institutions are not using climate risk as a way of not lending in those areas.
Okay.
Okay. So it's confusing, it's political, it can get complicated, but we're getting a lot of interest in today's conference from financial institutions and non-financial institutions, knowing that they can actually do a climate risk assessment on their assets.
So does that
Does
mean
all that make sense? I mean,
Yeah.
It's a mouthful.
Clear as mud. Clear as mud. Marc.
So does that mean if I could have a climate risk assessment on my facility, let's say where I live in Guelph, Ontario, an hour west of Toronto, and I could find out what kind of climate activity I'm vulnerable to,
That's
and
right.
could be in the coming years as well?
That's right. That's correct. Because today we address the physical risk, which are the 18 weather hazards I just talked about.
Mhm.
But we are also incorporating the transition risk, and that's all of that. I mean, we're talking about the reduction of carbon and fossil fuel energy. And that's what those scientific models have been developed. It also could be controversial.
Right. So do you see climate change or climate risk as one of the key issues right now in the resilience industry?
Absolutely. And the reason for
Do you think
that,
it's being addressed enough?
I think
And the
it's
reason I asked that
a good
question is because when I started, one of the first things that were always in every plan is, do you have a plan for a thunderstorm? Do you have a plan for an earthquake? So that's why I'm asking now, even after all this time, is that still relevant?
I think it's being addressed just enough because you need to get the companies behind it. So 2 weeks ago, the SEC announced new guidance for publicly traded companies. And some feel the guidance was too easy, some feel the guidance was too hard. I just read something yesterday that there's lawsuits now being thrown out, not thrown out, but are starting because the some public organizations feel it's too much. But 40% of publicly traded companies right now are doing something when it comes to climate risk, especially putting information in there about in their annual reports and that sort of thing. The OCC, the FDIC, the Federal Reserve, the New York Department of Financial Services, which is the banking regulatory agency for state-regulated banks in New York. They just came out with guidance of what they want banks and mortgage companies to do when it comes to climate risk. So it's a topic that is on the radar screen. Now, people will say, well, it depends on who gets in the White House in November to dictate, can this be discussed more or discussed less? It's actually a good idea to know what your climate risk is, especially regarding physical risk when it comes to your assets. It has nothing to do with politics. It's just a good idea. And there's technology out there and data out there in companies like Specialized Data that can help you measure the climate risk for your assets, for your organization.
So that way, business people like us, business continuity people, we can then plan for the right things.
Yes.
Do we run a risk of planning for the wrong things? Because if there's something that gets pointed out in, you said we can maybe predict what could happen in 50 years, I might be planning for something in 50 years, but I'm trying to get approval from an executive going, 50 years, I won't be here anymore. Why should I care about that? Right?
My focus right now is, because I don't want to get those. I've been with banks where the management team rolled their eyes. By the time they finished looking at our product, they were going to executive management to get the money for our technology, because I focused on the physical risks. Those 18 weather hazards I talked about earlier, which is based on current information, real information, plus the community resilience that we talked about, because that's what the regulators are looking for.
Right.
And not only the community resilience, but the vulnerability of that community. And that's what the regulators are looking at the composite risk, the combined risk. And I can speak very well about the banking space, because that's the world I live in.
Right.
For those bankers that are listening to me that use our technology, we've been doing this for 36 years. I'm all about providing value for their investments, and it's working.
And I guess each year you could revisit, or maybe daily, I guess.
The database changes every year.
Yeah, so you could find out.
It's changing every year. They do an update. So it's. And what I was surprised at today is, besides the banks and credit unions that were here, they were very interested in that. Even some companies that are not in that space, they want to know what their climate risk is to their facilities, to their assets.
Yes.
So that's my story.
That's fantastic. You're one of the few vendors, or if not the only vendor, really focused on climate risk in our space, so we appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, if I could put a plug in, if that's allowed.
You can put a plug in, go for it.
Our toll-free number is, see if I can remember it, because I never call it, is 888 408 4335. That's 888-408-4335. I think that's the number. You can look up. You can find us.
If that's wrong, what's the website name?
What's your website?
Well, there's two ways you can find us.
SpecializedData.com.
And people can say, well, how do you spell specialized? So it's specializeddata.com. But the easiest way is type in banksoftware.com. That's simple. software.com.
That's
a
an
good
easy one.
URL. Yeah.
Yeah, how'd you get that one?
I ordered it about 30 years ago.
I was
Oh,
saying,
well,
that's
that would be
another
good.
podcast.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Well, thanks for stopping by, Mark. We really
Well, I
appreciate it.
and that's great what you guys do and help us get the word out to America and to our clients. And I want to thank you for inviting me here.
Of
Not
course,
just
thank
America. I have listeners in
We-
Mongolia,
We do.
believe it or not.
Very cool.
So
We have
there
other
we
people
go.
Is this recorded so people can
Oh
listen?
yeah, you're
Oh, yeah.
live right now,
Yeah,
by
you're
the
live
way.
now, and it'll be recorded. Yep, absolutely.
So if you hiccup or burp, they're gonna hear it.
No, we won't do that.
Yeah. All right, Mark.
Thank you,
Well, we
guys.
Thank you so
appreciate
much, Mark.